We're just blessed to have Margaret Mercer here tonight to share the word with us.
Thank you, Lord.
Right? I thank you for coming. Thank you. Father, I thank you for Margaret. I thank you for her willing heart to come out, to take out a night out of her life, to share with us. And that doesn't count all of the hours of preparation. So, Father, I pray tonight as she pours out that you would pour more in. That by the time this night is finished, she would be fuller than she is right now.
Yes, Lord.
I pray for her to be way above full,
Yes.
so that it's just pouring out every side of her, God. In Jesus' name, bless her, keep her. We pray protection around you. Thank you for coming in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks, Gloria. So, we're going to start with a scripture, but thanks, Chuck. I titled my talk tonight, Moving Forward, because that's our theme for this time. Moving Forward in Faith. So, or faith to move forward. Whichever way. So, my story, my journey with the Lord starts with Hebrews 11. Especially the first verse and verse 6, Chuck, if you want to put those up. Now faith is assurance of things hoped for, a conviction of things not seen. And 6 is, without faith it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. And so my journey with the Lord, probably it did start earlier, but this is the portion that I remember. As a child, I went to Sunday school. My parents didn't go to church, but a neighbor collected all of the children around that were out in the streets and put them in a station wagon, took them down to Central Baptist for Sunday school. So I went to Sunday school, and I went to Camp Imidine as a child, and had a wonderful time. Loved camp, didn't want to ever go home, but I felt there was this pressure on the campers, the leaders of each cabin, to get their whole cabin saved. This was the big issue at camp. And I'm like, you're not getting me. Yes, I have very stubborn roots. And I don't know, there was something in me that just reacted against that competition there was between all the cabin leaders. And, I loved being at camp, I loved being in that atmosphere, and probably loved the Lord, but didn't understand it. And it never, I kind of have an analytical mind, so it didn't make sense to me that you would just say this prayer and everything in your life would be wonderful. So, fast forward a few years, I'm now married, have 2 children, going through some struggles now. My sister got saved. My sister next to me, there's 5 of us in our family. My sister next to me got saved, and she decided she needed to pray for the whole family. This was her project in prayer. She was going to pray us all into the kingdom. And, she just did really well. So my youngest sister then got saved, and my brother's wife got saved. And so they're all praying for me. And so the more they prayed, the worse my life got. It was one of those things. I was already in kind of crisis in my life. My marriage was in trouble. And I was used to running my own life, and I thought I knew how to keep everything on track. I thought I could manage my life. And I had been managing my life my whole life. So the more these ladies prayed, the worse everything got. And they actually said to each other, do you think we should stop praying for her? But God was wanting to bring things to a head, and he sometimes does that. When we start praying for somebody or some situation, sometimes it gets worse. It doesn't always get better. And so I got to the point where every Thursday I would phone my sister and say, I'm coming over for tea, and she'd say, oh, well, that's our Bible study day. I can't see you on Thursday morning. And I'm like, every Thursday? Why did I have that desire in my heart to be there, you know? And my sister said to me, well, you know, if you'd like to come, you could babysit the children. I'm like, that's the last thing in the world I want to do at this point in my life, is babysit somebody else's children. Anyhow, they didn't give up. They kept praying. And then my husband and I separated. And I was just distraught and didn't know what to do with myself. So I started going to the Sunday school where my children were going at this point with my sister. And it was actually a children's work. There really was not a church. It was a little children's work in a school. And they decided to start a little Bible study for the adults because some of the parents were staying. And so this was what they were studying, was Hebrews 11. And I don't actually remember much about that time because I was in such emotional distress that I was going, but I don't really remember a lot of it. Except that one day I came home from there and I suddenly realized that God was there in my kitchen with me. I really felt like if I turned quick enough, I would see him. There was such a powerful presence of the Lord in my kitchen. And I was just, all of a sudden, everything clicked. I knew that everything I'd been taught was real.
Wow.
And it was just a huge revelation to me that all that teaching I'd had as a child, all the verses I'd memorized and the plaques that I'd made and everything else, it was real. And I was just totally changed in that instant because, you know, I'd had the foundation, but I had never really got a hold of it. I was too determined to run my own life and be independent. And all of a sudden, all the things got taken away, and God says, here I am. And I've been here all the time.
Wow.
And he had been. I mean, we don't know that, but he's been there every day of our lives, right beside us, and wanting to help us with the things that go on in our lives. And so, all of a sudden, my husband wanted to come back. And that was very interesting, because by that point, I was just so in love with the Lord, I didn't care. I was just like, I've got this new life, it's great. But, and so it seemed like things were going to work out, and he started coming out to a few things with me at the church, and we went camping with the church and that type of thing, but it was not working. It was still lots of conflict. We separated, we got back together again, we separated, we got back together again, and I was just like worn out with the whole thing. I'm just like, God, there's got to be an answer. Either it's going to be a go or it's not going to be a go. And during that period of time, so that dragged on for about 3 years, and I was going to a lot of Christian meetings and hearing testimonies, and all these women would get up and say, I became a Christian, my husband got saved, my children got saved, my life is wonderful now, and I'm just like, I don't identify with any of this at all. I mean, I'm trying to, but it's not my experience. I'm hearing these testimonies, and I thought, well, I must be doing something wrong. It must be about me. But the time came when we did finally separate, and I felt God say, now I'd taken him back 3 times, and I felt God say, this is it. And so we separated for final. And so then I was a single mom trying to figure out how to walk by faith and not by sight, because this is a journey you've never been on before. And people were praying for me and supporting me. Now I was going to the ladies' Bible study where they had prayed. And this one lady said to me, are you Linda's sister? And I'm like, yeah. The one we were praying for? And I'm like, yeah. Oh. God actually answered our prayers. And so then I had to go back to work full time. And so the bank where I had been working phoned me and offered me a job. And I'm like, no, I don't want that job. And then they phoned me again and said, we have this job we'd like you to take. And I'm like, no. I just didn't feel up to what they wanted me to do, like to be on the front line and face the public. I was just going through too much emotional turmoil in my own life to be able to face that. And they phoned a third time, and finally I said, that must be you, God. Nobody's going to phone 3 times. And it was a job kind of a clerical admin type work, so that I could sit in the background, I could do the work. It was pretty mindless, and so I could kind of start putting my life together. And then, so for 3 years I was on my own with the boys, and then my husband said he wanted to have a divorce. And during that time I was still praying for my marriage, because I thought, you know, God can do amazing things. He can do miracles. We heard one tonight. And but it just wasn't the way it was going to be. And so the time came, I had to sell my house. And now this was the next big step of faith. Like, are you going to believe that God can actually provide more than you could ask or imagine? Or are you going to sit down and cry? And so it was a big prayer project of about 9 months. And I did a lot of crying and stressing through that time. But you know, that doesn't mean I had lost my faith. I still had faith that God was looking after me, but I still hadn't grown to the point of being able to just be at peace with that, what I needed to walk through. And so that was a long prayer project, but it felt like a birthing project, and it turned out to be a birthing project because I ended up with a brand new house, which was an absolute miracle. You know, just walking through that, because I did not have enough money to buy anything that I would have wanted. And the realtor kept taking me to look at places, and I'm just like, I can't live here. I can't live here. And I would go home and I'd cry. And I knew that God had something better. I really did believe that God knew what was in my heart and what I needed. And the realtor came to me, and he was a Christian. He came to me one day at work, and he said, you gotta come right now. And I'm like, I can't. You know, I have to wait till my break. When you work in banks, you can't just walk out. So he waited till my coffee break or my lunch hour, and he picked me up and he drove me over to a place. And I had said to the Lord, I don't want to move out of the neighborhood because I don't want my boys to have their lives disrupted to that extent. That I want them to be able to keep going to the same schools, and I need to be close to my work. And so I had a lot of conditions I was giving the Lord. And Ted pulled up and he said, this is where your new house is going to be. And I'm like, my new house? And it's going to be here? And he's like, yeah. He said, it's very interesting, but the circumstances in that new subdivision they were building was that this lot was owned duplex, and what they were building were called link homes. And so it was like townhouses, except we had, the house that I was getting was two stories, way bigger than what I'd had before. And everything was just first class in this house. I'm still living in this house today. This is 33 and a half years ago that I'm talking about. So this house was something that God wanted to give me, and I had to have faith to walk through that, because it was not an easy walk through that time of believing for this house, that I was going to get this brand new house being built. And you know, I had trouble selling the other house, then it sold, and then the deal fell through, and it was just like very stressful going through that. But the day came when I moved into my brand new house. And my sister came, and her husband, and he's a builder, and they live in Camel River, and she was the one that was praying for us.
Okay.
And so my brother-in-law to the house, and he said, wow, I don't believe this. You know, you've got oak cabinets, you've got skylights, you've got a wood stove. Like, there's no way they could have built this for what you paid for it.
Wow.
And he was so touched that he went back to church.
Wow.
So it was a testimony. He knew that that house was worth a lot more than what it was sold to me at. And it really touched his heart that God actually, because he wanted to build me a house. He had said, if I lived in Victoria, I would build you a house. And you know, because they all were feeling a lot of compassion for our family. And so, and it was just so sweet because he said, there's no way you could have gotten this house. So that was a real miracle. And even where I worked at the bank, because it was one of our clients that was building it, so he was in the bank quite often to talk to me about it. And everybody drove by my house every day because it's right on the chosen road. So it was a very visible miracle.
Wow. Thank you, Lord.
So, 4 years after that, we were at Camp Imogen again. Now I was going back as an adult and I was a Christian. Actually, I didn't tell you, my oldest son got saved at camp that summer, just before I met the Lord. And it was a bad summer, and my husband and I had gone to pick him up from camp, and he says, oh, guess what, Mom? I became a Christian at camp. No, another one. This is my two sisters have become Christians, and now my son. And in our family, it kept on happening because my brother-in-law came to the Lord about the same time as I did. And then my older brother, who was really even more stubborn than I was, he came to the Lord as well. So it was like dominoes. It was a real miracle. And I put that down to prayer. My sister, to have the faith to pray for our whole family. So we were at camp, and we were at family camp, and I was down by the water having a quiet time, and God gave me a word from Scripture that I was going to be going to the mission field. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's so exciting. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I came back and I wrote an application to go to YWAM, and I wanted to do my training in Vancouver because it's quite close to Victoria, and I could come back and run everything on my free time. I still haven't learned. Not quite. So I was accepted. I had to get references, and my pastor had to say nice things about me and that I would fit into the YWAM mold. So I was all kind of coming together, and I thought this was where we were going. And my youngest son was going to go with me, and my oldest son was going to live with his dad. He was 19 by this time, and he was working and ready to launch, or I thought he was ready to launch. Anyhow, then a few months went by, and things started to kind of not go so well. And I'm like, do I need to press through this? Or what is it God's telling me? You know, the bank wouldn't let me have the time off, and it was just like one thing after another. Obstacles started to come in the way, and I was like praying. I really want to go. I really want to go, but am I supposed to go now? And in the end, it was just like, no. And I was just so disappointed. I thought, you know, I had heard from the Lord, and I was meant to go. And now everything fell apart, and people were questioning me, like, did you really hear? And, you know, I was just so upset. I had stepped down from everything I was involved with because I was going away. And so I kind of tore up all my YWAM application and cried over it and said, well, what am I going to do now? I don't know what I'm going to do. And, you know, I couldn't even sit in church. For the next year and a half, I sat in the nursery. And I cuddled babies. Because I was just really, my dream had just been shattered. And I just felt like, I don't know what to do. You know, you get to that place that what you thought God told you was to go, and then it all fell apart, and I thought, I don't know what to do now. So I just did nothing. I just cuddled babies. And, you know, I wasn't mad at God. I wasn't really mad at anybody. I was just disappointed and confused because I didn't know why. But as it had turned out, my mother had been diagnosed with cancer just after I applied and in that process. And I see, in retrospect, that I was meant to stay and be with my mom through that time. And so it was about a year and a half later that my mother passed away. And I went to a conference in Victoria called Together 89. I don't know if anybody was in Victoria at that time. It was up at the university. And they had a little mission fest thing going on there. And as I walked by, this YWAM table, trying not to look, the Lord says, now it's time to go. And I'm like, what? And I went home and I looked for my stuff and I couldn't find anything because I'd thrown it all away. It was just too funny. And so I thought, well, I don't know. And then my youngest son decided he was going to live with his father. He was 16 at that time and he needed to be with his dad. And a lot of things all of a sudden came to an end. And I was like, well, where am I supposed to go? Vancouver's not available at this time of the year. The only place that was open was Hawaii, and I didn't want to go to Hawaii because, everybody else went to Hawaii, and I thought it's hot and it's sticky, and I don't really want to go there. And but that was the only place that was available. It was the only place that was available. So I didn't have to reapply, so I just asked Vancouver to send over my paperwork to Hawaii, and they said yes, I could come. But it was full. The course was full. So as I walked through that summer, this was June when I got the word from the Lord, and as I walked through that summer, I had to make decisions about walking by faith and not by sight. Did I really hear from the Lord this time? Because people were still doubting me about, well, you thought you heard back then, so what are you going to do now? And I had a really responsible job. I was managing a department in the Royal Bank, and the bank was my pension plan, it was my future, and they wouldn't let me have the time off to go. And so I'm walking through this summer with a lot of questions and feeling that I was wrestling with the enemy. And I phoned friends and said, would you pray for me? Because I don't know what to do. And one guy phoned me back, he said, you're not wrestling with the enemy. You're wrestling with God. He was trying to shake me loose from that dependence on thinking that the Royal Bank was my provider. He's my provider. But I didn't know that at that point. So he was teaching me, this is a faith walk. I mean, you just really don't know. So as I went through that summer, I finally thought, I need to quit. Hawaii was full. The course was full, so there was no place for me to go. And so, what am I going to do? And, one of the things I've always felt that you need to check a word from the Lord. First of all, is it biblical? Yeah, going to missions is biblical. And to get the counsel of mature believers, and I did that. I asked people to pray for me, and nobody got a no. They just said, be careful. You really need to be careful and make sure. If you have a gut feeling that this is what you should do, that's also got to come into that. But then the other few things, like circumstances have to fall into place, and then you have to have peace. At this point, I didn't have peace. And the circumstances still weren't clicking together. And so I'm still questioning the Lord about it. And finally I got to the day that I felt like, faith without works is dead. Right? I can say I believe in God all my life, but are you going to get out of the boat?
Yeah.
Does that moment come when you've got to make a decision and you've got to take that step that you don't know what's actually going to happen? You can't figure it out, and you can't have a plan B.
Yeah.
And so I handed in my resignation. It was a scary day. And I had such tremendous peace flood over me that I actually knew at that moment that everything was going to be fine. And everybody around me is freaking out, but I knew it was going to be okay at that moment because I had that peace that passes understanding. It was just that whole sense, I just did the right thing. And so a few weeks later at work, I had given them 2 months notice. So that was in August, and I was leaving at the end of September because if the chorus in Hawaii was going to have an opening, it was going to start in the end of September. So a couple of weeks later, a new coworker had transferred into our department, and she said, "Oh, I'm looking for a house rent." And I'm like, "Oh, well, I have a house that I'm going to be renting, but it's out in Colwood." And she said, "Oh, well, I want to buy out there, and I'd like to live out there for a while so I could check it out, and blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Plus, it's too big for just you and your little boy." "Oh," she said, "my sister's coming to live with me for 6 months. She's going to Ubic." So it was just like plop. She came out, looked at the house. "Yes, we'll take it for 6 months." And so that was taken care of. Okay, so now I've quit the job, got a renter for my house, but I don't know where I'm going. And even my pastor was speaking out. "What are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know. Maybe I'll be out on the sidewalk with my suitcases saying, 'Where are we going?'" Anyhow, a couple of weeks before the course was starting, Hawaii phoned me at work and said, "We've had a cancellation in this DTS, and we've been praying about it. We think it's for you. Is that okay?" I said, "Yeah, I've already quit my job and rented out my house." And the guy said, "What?" But for the personality type that I have, that was such a huge thing for me to do.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it was so far out of my comfort zone of wanting security and wanting things in place. I like to know what's going on. I had no clue. It was the best decision I ever made in my life. It was life-changing to go to Hawaii. In fact, I say to people, I'd never been away from home before. I was raised in Victoria. I got married right out of my parents' home at 19. So my dad was the overseer. Then I moved in with my husband, and he looked after everything. And then suddenly I was on my own and had to make decisions for my children. And I'd never been away from home, like without somebody in my family around me. And all of a sudden I'm going to Hawaii, and as I found out, it was a huge blessing. I really thought I was going to be a missionary. That was my launch into the mission world, and I loved every minute of it. I was the happiest I've ever been in my life, I think. The YWAM is amazing, and went on outreach to South America. We were the first group. I wanted to go to South America. I'd met missionaries at camp that were from Bolivia and another Asian country. But anyhow, I wanted to go to South America, and they said, "No way. Hawaii always goes to Asia." So we were supposed to be going to Malaysia and Thailand, and at the last minute it all changed. "You're going to South America." And I'm like, "Yay, God, I'm in this now. I know how to do this. I know how to pray for things like you in the rain." And I'm just like, whoopee. I get it. And I went to South America and had the time of my life. I just loved every minute of it and didn't want to come home. And so it was over, camp was over, YWAM was over, and unless you hear from the Lord a clear word, you need to go home and wait. That was the big 4-letter word in YWAM, wait. So I came home and I was just so sad. It was so good to be living community and have all this wonderful Christian atmosphere all the time, and praying for each other, and just in worship every day, and just a wonderful, wonderful time. But it was time to come home, and I was just like to my empty house. And I forgot to tell you, my house is way too big for me. And that was another issue with when I first got it. My sister said, "I wonder why God's giving you such a big house." Well, as it transpired, it was because I was going to open a bed and breakfast. I did not know that. But when I came back from YWAM and then was thinking, praying about it, and it's something about hospitality. God's saying something about hospitality, and I'm like, "Oh, well, I'll just apply back to Hawaii and see if I can come on staff and work in hospitality." And so I did. And as soon as they looked at my resume and saw I was a banker, they were like, "Oh, could you come now and work in the accounts office?" And I'm like, "No, it's hospitality." And they said, "Sorry, there's no openings." So I just kept praying, and God says, "Start with what you got." It's the house. the house that I prayed for is the house that now is my supplementing my pension money. And so, see, God had this whole long-term plan that I had no clue was going to be coming. It was all in His works, but I had to walk through it quite blindly by faith that God knew what He was doing when I didn't know what He was doing. And it's scary. It's like that song about ocean, you know? when you just don't know what the ending's going to be. And it's a scary place, but walking with God becomes so exciting that you don't even care. And so I went from this scaredy cat person that didn't like to really do anything to traveling all over the world. I've been all over the world now with YWAM and with missions, and not that I planned any of it. But you know, whenever somebody says, you know, there's a chance to go to so-and-so place, and I'm like, take me.
Yeah.
You know, like, I just don't care. You know, when Clarking was planning that whole thing to Mongolia, and I'm just like, oh, I've never been to Mongolia. I'd like to go there. Yeah, I'm in. And people say to me, gosh, I wish I could do that. And I said, you can.
Yeah.
You know, you really can. It's not about anybody being special. It's about people being available and saying, I don't care. I don't know what the conditions are going to be. I don't know what we're going to be doing. But I know God's going there. And I'm going with Him. And it's going to be great. And it's about not worrying about the future. Because walking by faith, there's no concrete, there's promises in the Word. God promises to look after us. And even to our old age, He's promised to look after us. And we need to hold Him to His promises. And you were talking about, or somebody was talking about children and promises for their children. God gave me a scripture for my oldest son in 1985. And I know that He's going to bring that to pass because that was from God. And He you know, when He gives us promises, we need to stand on them and not doubt. It's like in James it says, those people who doubt are like something tossed around by the wind. Yes, it's a double-minded man who can't decide. And so God wants us to actually just put that step out like Peter did. And if we keep our eyes on the Lord as we walk out, then He does amazing things. And I don't have any fears anymore about doing something that seems outlandish or something that seems expensive even. I've learned about finances as well, to trust God to look after me, because I had my plan and it wasn't working. But His plan is better. So God says in Hebrews 10:23, let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for He who promised is faithful. So it's about trusting God and not leaning on our own understanding, because He's so amazing and He is so good to us. Even through the hard times, there's always the goodness of God to hold on to. And I really bless that sister that prayed us all into the kingdom, because, you know, if it hadn't been for people praying, I don't know what would have happened, you know. So it's a real encouragement to all of us to just keep on praying and trusting God for what we're believing in, because He is a rewarder of those that diligently. And so I'm just going to end on that. So let me just pray. Father, I just thank You that You are an amazing God, and You want to take all of us on amazing journeys, God. They're not going to be the same because we're all different, but God, I thank You that You are faithful. You will never disappoint us, God, because You are a faithful God and Your promises are true. And so I just pray tonight You would build our faith, God, that You strengthen our faith in everything that we're believing for tonight, God, and that we will just hold on to Your promises and know that you will never disappoint us. In Jesus' name, amen.